and welcome to the Third Quarter Shutout podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joe, and I'm joined by Kyle.
Hello.
And I'm also joined by the other Joe, Mr. Lockwood. How are you, sir?
Hello, I'm all good.
Good. So today's episode, following on from kind of the past two episodes where we kind of did two in the same weekend, we've got our diamonds in the rough for this draft class. So specifically, we're kind of looking at later kind of day three guys, earlier day three guys. Really kind of depends on who you are out of the three of us and who you're talking about. Just kind of a brief kind of, introduction. This podcast really started from us talking about some of the later day three guys. So we all met through football, Kyle as a coach, me and Joe playing together. And this is kind of where we really started to talk about football. But it wasn't really until kind of around this time last year where we all kind of really got together and started to discuss it really in depth. And especially a couple of guys that, I mean, as a Pats fan last year, I really only cared about the first round pick and the quarterback, and that was it. I choose to ignore the rest of that draft class, to be completely honest with you. But I know you two guys had a couple of favourites from last year. So, I mean, Kyle, do you want to kind of talk about the process of all that?
Yeah, last year with Panthers not having a first round pick, it became more for me about the whole experience. I just sort of threw myself into it more than I ever did before. And through just looking at day three guys and just different sort of hidden gem style players, I found Jalen Coker of Holy Cross, and he ended up being an undrafted free agent to the Panthers in the end. But throughout the entire process, I just sort of really fell in love with him and fell in love with his story. And I know Lockwood fell in love with Bob Means in a similar way. And fortunately for him, he also went to the Saints. And it became sort of us three sort of geeking out on day three players or unheard of players in a way that most people don't. They only sort of talk about the top 50. And then I think that from last year sort of slowly spiraled into us deciding to do this together. So I think sort of today will be a nice sort of homage to where we came from and how we ended up starting this journey together, if you will.
Yeah, it's what we love about it, man. Kind of teams are made in day three. Teams are made in day three. Everyone always says it, but you look at kind of some players that have kind of come from the day three in drafts, but some of the best players in football history, realistically. You talk about kind of an easy top 10 receiver, Antonio Brown, for example, was a 6th round pick, I'm pretty sure. Obviously, there was another guy that was a 6th round pick that might just be the best player in football history. But we won't talk about the past. We'll kind of move on and we'll talk about the future and some of these kind of later kind of round guys that we really kind of just enjoy watching. And we think, even though there are some flaws, we really think they are great players.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off with the first player on the list of the hidden gems. He's probably the one that's going to get drafted the highest. I'll say it's a defensive player, and that's something that we've noticed throughout the process is that we've selected a lot of defensive players. All three of us all played defense in our time playing football. We were all very defensive heavy players. I think we have a bit of a soft spot for the defensive players of the draft. So I think the player I've picked first is going to be drafted highest out of all that we're about to speak about today. That's CJ West out of Indiana. I want to describe him as a fire hydrant. He's a really compact, 316 pounds, 6'1". He's a compact defensive nose tackle. He's just violent, aggressive. He's quick. He's someone that I like, and just plop him in the middle of the defense and just let him rush into the backfield and hit running backs. I think from watching his tape, he can fit where water can't when it comes to getting through an offensive line. He just finds gaps wherever. He's got really great leverage with his low center of gravity. He kind of just has, in a way, he has stand in his pants like you described an offensive guard. He's just able to stand up a guard and then get off them. He's got really violent hands and he creates a lot of knockback with his violent hands. and he is for his size. He's a very very quick player. 4.9540 for someone who's over £300 is very impressive. But I say they wouldn't be late round players if they didn't have the drawbacks. And I think the main one for me with CJ West is just it's small arms. He has really tiny arms, 31 and a half inch arms. He likes to lead with a bull rush, and that's something that you can't really get away with those arms at the NFL level. I think that's something that will hold him back. He doesn't really have a counter move if his bull rush doesn't work. So yeah, I think that's for me. CJ West, he's a great player, but he does have his limitations, as a lot of these players will.
You hit one of my nails in the head with him as to why he's kind of, you look at him and he's kind of his rankings are all over the place. You look at kind of some of the bigger sites and kind of who's talking about him. Some people have him going start of the third, but he can span all the way to kind of the fourth, fifth round realistically. One of the reasons, like you said, is the arm length. He does have quite short cannon arms, um, and he's going to really kind of struggle, especially against kind of some of these offensive linemen in the NFL. Um, for example, and he's kind of a one-off sort of player, but the kind of how the Eagles use Mekhi Becton, you stick him against someone like that who's just an absolute giant, and he's going to get manhandled a little bit. And I think part of that comes from the arms, but I think also he does sometimes when you see some of these kind of like 6 foot, 6'1", really heavy guys, you like to see some kind of real explosiveness with him. And I think one of the things that I noticed from him is that he's not massively explosive. He does just kind of fire out in quotation marks with those arms, and he kind of doesn't really have a plan what he's doing after that. And I think this is kind of where I kind of see the issues with him. Don't get me wrong, I think can be a very good player and could be a very good player. He just needs to refine that a little bit. I think ideally, you're probably not wanting him to play at a nose tackle level at the NFL purely because of the lack of size and explosiveness. You might want to put him kind of maybe a one tech, two tech kind of guy, just have him kind of one on one with a guard. That's probably where he's kind of going to shine more than anything. But yeah, Kyle, what do you think? Do you agree with what I've said? Kind of you higher or lower on him than what Joe said?
I think he absolutely could play nose tackle at the NFL level. You're both correct about the arms. I think the main thing with the arms is it's then the separation he's able to create against the
Yeah.
offensive lineman. NFL offensive linemen are going to have longer arms. If they're outreaching you by 2 or 3 inches, you've got to fight harder and harder to get there. And to his credit, if you watch his footage, his feet never stop working. The
His feet
motor
are
he's
good. His
got
feet
is
are good.
constantly going. He's constantly fighting. And I think he does bring the arms in as well. And at worst, he's an anchor. Like, I think of all the games and all the sort of tape we've seen of him, I can't think of a clip where I saw him going backwards. And considering how many times he commanded a double team, for him to at worst hold his ground, if not get that penetration, I think is really impressive.
Yeah, I think he's an early down run defender for me, if anything. But he's someone that with a bit of NFL coaching, improving on his instincts once he gets into the backfield and improving on his tackling form. I think he's someone that could become more a bigger contributor as his career progresses.
Go on then, Lockwood, is your player. If you were an NFL GM, where would you draft him? What pick are we looking at for him?
I think it's someone where you're going to have to weigh up about other teams going after him. I think there are going to be a lot of teams who are interested in him, so I think that's going to inflate his stock. I think this defensive tackle class is really good, so that could also weigh into it. I think for me, he's probably fourth round, early day three. I'd probably say.
Priority day 3 type of guy.
And I'll go with my next player, um, someone that I have absolutely fallen in love with throughout this kind of pre-draft process. And these two can attest to it. Whenever I'm doing kind of like a mock draft or anything like that, where I'm kind of doing the Pats, some of these mock draft sites, they don't really have the rankings 100%, but somehow this player always falls into my lap. and this is Elijah Huzzy from the University of North Carolina. He's a cornerback. Um, Got a small cornerback. He's looking around about 5'10", 5'9" ish, and he's sub 200. He's about 190. But man, what this guy lacks in, the raw measurables, he has in kind of just the way he plays the game. Um, he's a really smart football player, kind of from what I've seen, which helps when you've played kind of for so long. I've read somewhere that he's played over kind of like 3,500 college snaps, which when you're a cornerback as well, you just kind of start to recognize patterns, you start to recognize the game, and it really helps with a lot of different things. A little kind of interesting tidbit with this player is that he's not just a defensive back, he's a punt returner as well. And I really enjoy kind of he's really kind of fun when he gets the ball. There are a couple of moments where, he's got the ball in his hands. There's a couple of kind of punt returns and stuff that I've just seen him do that he kind of picks up, moves a couple of steps, and he's not one of those players that will continuously fight and fight and fight for yards. He will just jump out of bounds if he doesn't think he's getting anything. Um, which again, that comes from possibly that smartness. If you don't think he's going to be able to hold on to the ball through contact, that kind of thing, um, he's just going to jump out of bounds, which really isn't that bad. He's also, and I'll kind of move in and out of kind of some of the positives and negatives for him. He's not the fastest guy ever. He's really not the fastest guy ever, and he's going to struggle at that next level, at the NFL level, playing the same position he does for UNC. Right now, he's an outside cornerback that mainly plays in press, but really, he's not going to be able to do that at the NFL level. With his measurables as well, he's probably going to be playing a bit more of a zone nickel. You just kind of sit in there, and the best thing about him is kind of, I'll say the last thing before I kind of pass it on to you two. Ultimately, the best thing about him is how aggressive he is when he plays, how he kind of just flies about. Even though he's not fast, he has good change of direction, and he will just throw himself at a ball. He only had one interception this past year, but pass deflections, you just see him, he just launches himself and his body at the ball to try and stop the guy from catching it, and it works more often than not. So, kind of with that being said, you know, Kyle, we'll go to you first. What are your thoughts on my boy Elijah Huzzy?
It's yours, all right. You've not shut up about him. I like him as a player. You used aggressive. I think the word I'd use is tenacious. Doesn't shy
Yeah.
from contact, and I think a lot of cornerbacks, they sort of do the bare minimum when it comes to run plays or sort of crashing down on screens. He doesn't shy away from contact. He's always looking for it. A good open field tackler as well. Combine that with that special teams experience as both a returner and then other elements as well. I think even if he hasn't got cornerback coaches and defensive coordinators fawning over him, I should imagine most special teams coordinators in the league are turning around to their guys and saying, we need him, or, he's on my list, please do something about it. Unfortunately for him, he did tear his ACL at the Shrine Bowl. It's major doubts whether he's going to be even able to play year one at all. And when you combine the amount of snaps he had at college, so, a little bit older, and then not having potentially be able to play his first season, is that going to hurt his draft stock? Is he going to fall down to a later round, potentially making more of like a steal than a priority prospect that other teams might have had before the injury? I think it's interesting to see what will happen to him though.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've hit the nail on the head with obviously the injury, and then Joe with his long speed being a real issue. I think he clocked in at, it was a 4.5540 that he ended up recording. So, he isn't the quickest cornerback in the world, but I think in a zone heavy scheme, he's one of them players that he will thrive on just off his instincts and his intelligence, his play intelligence really does make up for the lack of speed he really has. So I think he's someone that if you sat him in a zone and just let him go to work, I think he will definitely be productive there. But yeah, it does come down to whether he can play this season, because I think that could cause him to fall, because obviously this year is key for any player getting drafted. It's key for the development. They need to get that first year under the belt.
It is, and it's why I'm kind of when I'm doing this kind of prediction of kind of where I think he would go. I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you without the tear and with the injury as well. Ultimately, I think you guys have made some really good points. I think without the injury, he could be a very good early contributor, especially to a team that has two outside man cornerbacks. Um, like I said, you stick him kind of in a nickel zone, you play him off coverage, he's gonna be an early contributor to you. With that in mind, I would probably have him as a mid fifth round pick, kind of like a mid fifth if he's not injured. If I'm being completely honest, I think he could be a little bit higher depending on team needs and where people have him on the big boards, because he definitely has the skill and the want to play at the next level. I will say with the injury, with him having so many snaps at college, like you said, Kyle, does make it a little bit more difficult. I expect he will go mid sixth round, mid six, early six.
So I'm going to jump in with my first player. I've chosen Syracuse linebacker, defensive end, edge, hybrid player Fidel Diggs. 3-year captain, 2 times at Texas A&M before he transferred over to Syracuse in his final year where he was the captain there. Started 32 of 45 games, Shrine Bowl invite, honourable mention all conference. Career stats, 120 tackles, 32.5 TFLs, 15.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and a handful of PBUs. Slight issues, maybe the majority of those stats did come in 2024 with 24 tackles, 14 TFLs, 7.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and fumble recovery. So, 45%, 50% of his career stats did all come in his last year. That could be he was a developing player. It could be he's moved from Texas A&M in the SEC to Syracuse in the ACC, so it's a slightly easier conference. But if you look at him, he's got that NFL size to him. Some NFL teams are quite picky about players meeting certain size requirements, and at 6'4", 260 pounds, size isn't a concern with him. He still has top level speed to pair with that size though. If you look at his combine 40 time, top 3 for players of his position. I think that's quite evident as well when you watch his play style. The explosion you see when he's coming off the snap or in his pursuit of players. And if you look at his pro day results as well, put up significant numbers on the bench, which was already showing that he started to bulk up and put on that NFL weight that NFL coaches like to see players have. Really versatile player to watch. It's uncommon for players to have played so much on sort of that edge position in the way he has. In his 3 years as a starter, he has over 1,000 snaps as a true edge player, which is pretty impressive. But then he's also got 350 snaps at a true off-ball linebacker position, and then a further 100 more as either heads up on the tackle or an inside shade. For a guy to move from that 4 tech inside a offensive tackle to then a true middle backer or outside backer and edge as well, I think it gives him a certain level of positional versatility, but it also shows off his IQ. And I think that means that he's really going to be a good fit for most teams around the league. Being able to have done so many different things, he's going to be able to fit on most sort of different teams in one way or another. And you're interested to see what you guys think.
Yeah, he's a weird player in the nicest possible way. He's a weird player, especially predicted him kind of to the NFL. Some of the tape that I saw, like you mentioned, he plays a little bit of off the ball linebacker as well. I think it was the Georgia Tech game that I kind of nearly saw some film from, and I couldn't. It was just bizarre. It was just bizarre because he was being brought down to the line so many times. There was one play where like the the ball carrier was like 20 yards downfield and he was somehow in front of the ball carrier. And it's like, how are you getting to these positions? And like you said, it is that speed that's really good for him. Now, as you've probably noticed, let's say, for example, Kyle's introducing this player. me and Joe are bringing Kyle back down to earth a little bit. As it's kind of being that way so far. So I'll just kind of be brutally honest with it. I think his issues can be fixed with the right coaching. I think he plays way too high. Something that I saw is that when he's tackling, he kind of grabs the shoulders and just spins them down. For quite a lot of what I saw, there's none of that kind of like I'm going to wrap my arms around the back of this guy and just kind of power through him. It's very much I'm going to grab the top of his shoulders and just spin around until he ends up on the floor. He doesn't tend to have a lot planned when it comes to the pass rush. He tends to use that speed that he's got and just kind of catapult himself into a player a little bit um, until he can kind of push some hands towards the side and then win. Now, with the speed against some of the kind of competition he was playing against, that'll work for you at that level, especially kind of being the build that he is, the way that he is, being able to run a sub 460. That that'll work. But when you're coming up against some of these kind of bigger NFL guys, I I think there's a lot of refinement to be had with this player. I think he's a guy that can definitely kind of play, probably be that that edge number three sort of guy, maybe even an edge number two kind of guy, depending on kind of the defense that you're running with. But I think ultimately because of kind of how much work you've got to do with him, that's why he's kind of one of those diamonds in the rough, we're calling them. But yeah, what about you, Joe?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. He's a developmental guy. He has a lot of athleticism. His versatility and his athleticism is something that is really drawing for an NFL coach. But he does rely on his athleticism more than he does pass rushing technique. He doesn't quite have that technique. That's what I've got in my notes, that he relies on athleticism a lot more than technique. And I have also got that his tackling's a concern, that he's just inconsistent when it comes to tackling. I think for me, another thing that I did notice with him is that if a team runs at him, he can get washed out of plays. That high pad level gets him washed out of plays quite a lot. That if he's not coming around and making that tackle, they're running straight by him. So yeah, he's a good player, and he is someone that can develop. He's a situational pass rusher at the next level, and I think he's someone that can develop over time. It's the same with a lot of these defensive line players. Is that they develop into their roles. So by year 3, 4, by the end of his rookie deal, he probably will be a more involved pass rusher. But I don't know how much he's going to be as an instant impact player.
But he's one of
Yeah,
those guys, and I will just say it before we jump onto you quickly, Kyle. He's one of those guys that he could get to the NFL and just absolutely show up
Yeah.
because he's that fun to watch. He's that kind of quick with his steps that he could absolutely show up. So obviously, kind of following suit, you know, what are your kind of final thoughts on him, Kyle? And you know, where are you taking a chance on him?
he is a technically raw player, and I think a lot of that rawness comes from him playing lots of different positions as he's not able to master any of
Yeah,
them. Yeah, I was looking for a sort of a pro comp for him, and I didn't really come up with a pro comp. But what I've sort of done instead is I've described him as, if you want Jalen Walker, but you don't have Jalen Walker money, you know, if you didn't get Jalen Walker in the first, but you really wanted him, you can maybe take, Fidel
yeah.
Diggs in late fourth, early fifth sort of range. Because I think he is a gamble on the upside. Because he's an athletic freak, yes, as you've correctly said, his technique does need refining. But if he goes to a team that can let him develop and not throw him in the deep end too early, the gamble and the upside of that athleticness is he could go on to be an edge two on a team, or an off the bench rotational player as that sort of third man in a two-man rotating system. So yeah, I think late fourth, early fifth. I think you'll definitely see his name gone by then.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in next. Mainly because I want to speak about our first offensive player. Woo! Um, like just said, we've been very kind of defensive heavy, but this is an offensive player in. I know I'll give you a little hint. He's a running back in such a stacked class at the position. Um, I really don't think he's kind of necessarily getting enough love. I think there's reasons for it, which I will discuss. Yeah, and it's Taj Brooks from Texas Tech. Now, this guy is a little bit of a smaller player, standing at 5'9". He's got a relatively good weight behind him at 214 pounds. And ultimately, if you want to kind of class someone in this class as the workhorse, this is your boy right here. He, the amount of reps that this man has had in his time, even in the past 2 years, is just absolutely ridiculous. Just getting it up now. He has had 633 carries in his past 2 years of college football. That's not including reps that he's necessarily taken out, if there's been any injury concerns either. So he is the definition of a workhorse back, A couple of pros with the guy. He will fight for you. He will fight for you. He will just launch into players. He's smart. He's got really good vision. Um, Sometimes it can be a little bit of a downside with him because he can try to be a little bit too smart and wait for something to open up and not see something. But to me, I think kind of his first read with his vision when he trusts it is really good. And he tends to just fall forward for those extra yards, 1, 2 yards, keeps on pumping those feet, and ultimately, like I said, it's a stacked class. But if you're looking for kind of like a number two running back that you can, let's say, if you've got a number one with some injury concerns, which there are in the league, 100%, this could be a guy that you might want to take a chance on. Kind of a little bit of a pro comp, just in the way that they kind of play, kind of Chase Brown for the Bengals. Not the biggest guy ever, not kind of the most exciting running back ever, but he'll kind of fight for you. He's got the drive to kind of fight for it. I think obviously there are downsides. The 633 snaps are a downside. You know, he's played a lot of football, which for a running back can be a little bit of a pain. And ultimately, he doesn't have that true breakaway speed. You can see it on game. He looks slow on tape, not massively slow, but when you've kind of got the defenders around him, sometimes he can look a little bit slow. But Joe, kind of, what do you think about Taj Brooks?
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that really stood out for me when I was looking into him was his ball security for me. I think he's a reliable back. Across his career, he's only had 5 fumbles, which is incredible considering how many snaps he's actually taken. I think he's someone that's just is really reliable. As he's a good safety valve option in the passing game as well. Check down to him. He's had 2 career drops. He's just a reliable player who will gain you an advantage, will get you first downs. And you need that sort of player in your arsenal. I think he's not going to be your number one back, but back in a 2-3 man rotation, he's going to absolutely thrive. I think he can pass block well as well. I think he can't quite pick up blitzes. He struggles identifying linebackers coming through. But if you ask him, to pass block against the 4-man front, I think he's really good at that. I will add as well to his being a safety valve in the passing game. He has a fairly limited route tree. I wouldn't ask him to do many complex things in the passing game, but on an out or something like that, he is going to be able to pick up a couple of yards and get you that first down that you really need.
I think if you're looking for a way to describe him, he's just a proper north-south runner. Like he's
Oh,
not trying
100%.
to. Whilst he can cut and whilst he can avoid a tackler if he needs to, he's not making it too complicated with all this fancy footwork. He doesn't
No.
necessarily look for contact, but if contact comes, he's perfectly happy riding a tackle and keeping going. As you said, he's going to find that extra 1 or 2 yards. He is a really solid and nice runner. And we said this off camera. I think if he was in last year's class, he'd certainly be going a lot higher than he would in this year's class. The two
Yeah.
biggest knocks I've got against him are one, as you both said, the amount of snaps he's had. It's generally accepted that running backs have a clock on their body in terms of how many reps they can take before they either get injured or the performance level starts to drop. With him being used so much, he is just further along that timeline than some of the others. But the other reason that I think he's so far down this class is just the strength of it. if he was in a weaker class, he would not be getting talked about in these day 3 diamonds in the rough style players.
He'd be a day 2
He'd
guy.
be a
He'd
day
be an
2
early
guy.
round 3 guy.
He's not going to be. Teams wouldn't trade up for him. They wouldn't invest
No.
a first or a second on him. But he'd be a day 2 pick more times than he wasn't.
Yeah, and obviously with that in mind, kind of, I think it could be a 4th round guy. I think he could be a 5th round guy. I think he could be a 6th round guy. This is the issue with the running backs this year, and it's an issue that we've highlighted. Plenty of people have highlighted. But once you kind of get past, the top 6 or 7 guys, it really does become situational. It really does. And it's the same with every year with running back. But if you're looking for kind of a rotational guy that'll just churn you out a few yards here and there, you just need the occasional guy just to go in to just not be a full battering ram, but like you said, Kyle, just north south. He's going to run forward. He's going to fall forwards. He's going to get you a couple of yards. This is the guy you're looking for, really, out of a lot of them. But I'm going to go with a conservative early 5th round. Early 5th round is where I kind of predict him to be.
Yeah, so obviously my next guy, I've seen your small cornerback, Joe, and I'll raise you an even smaller cornerback in Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky. I think outside of his size, I absolutely love this guy. He's just really smart. He's a quick processor. He has a lot of his tackling just pops as well for me. I think he's a good short tackler in run support for me. He's versatile. He can play safety, he can play inside, he can play outside. I think that's a lot of things that I've had when initially researching him. Some places had him listed as safety, some places had him listed as corner. So I'm like, where the hell's this guy play? And then watching him on film, I can see exactly why those sites have him the way he is. I think another thing that really I like over Huzzy is he's quick. He's just he's got that speed to make up for his lack of height and size. 4.4440. He's really competitive as well at the catch point. I think he doesn't play to his size at all, and all of that he does on defense, he then carries over into special teams as well. So just to give Kyle a bit of love, he absolutely balls out on special teams as well. He's yeah, I just think he's a great player. He's just very very small. He's a very small human being. But yeah, I'll throw it over to you, Kyle. What do you think about him?
I mean, everything you've said's like bang on. Lives in the backfield. He plays versus the run more like a safety than he does a corner. I mean, he plays corner
Yeah.
like a safety, which I think is where some of these sort of not knowing what to list him as comes from. And as you said, he's quick. He flies around, no hesitation, gets to where he wants to be quicker than anyone else. If you want to look for a way to describe him, he's a terrier. He's got terrier attitude. He's small, he's quick, he's feisty. You're not going to build a defense around him, but if you've got a good group of people there, he can absolutely fill in a missing need for you. Two biggest concerns, as you said, the size, but he doesn't play to the size. He plays bigger than he is. Routinely, even though he's physically the smallest player, he's making the biggest hits, the biggest pops on the field. The other issue I have with him is he does get a bit handsy before the ball arrives. He pre-engages with receivers a bit, gets his hands mixed up in coverage. I think if he doesn't clean that up when he gets to the league, he could be a bit of a flag magnet. That is something that you can coach out of him, unlike the size. But if he can continue carry on playing bigger than he projects, and if he can clean up the flags and the hands in coverage, absolutely could be a much better player than I think most people expect him to be.
I agree with you there. I think one thing that I picked up as well is that, and this is just kind of a general thing about smaller cornerbacks, is that you're never going to put this guy up against an X receiver, against a true X receiver,
Oh, you're not
because he's
putting
going to
any
struggle
press on
against.
Mike Evans.
No, no, absolutely not. Because if it's a run, then even against some smaller receivers, he can't. He fights and fights and fights, but it's like, and this is gonna this is gonna seem really mean. You know when it's like in the cartoons where you've just got the really big guy just with one hand on someone's head. He's running like this. This is how I imagine him being a little bit. Obviously, this isn't how he is, and he's feisty, like you said, he's a terrier. But you put him up against someone big, and he's going to get wiped out of the play a little bit. Ultimately, I think he's going to struggle against jump balls at the NFL level a little bit. Um, but you put him up against a little bit of a smaller receiver that's a little bit quicker. He's gonna play really well. I think. Um, Ultimately, the biggest concern is the size. You've both spoken about it. It's something that he can't help. Ultimately, um, but it's like you say, he doesn't play to his size. He pops. He fights for everything. Um, again, he's not a guy like we said about Huzzy. He's not scared of contact. He wants the contact. I think my only concern is obviously sometimes they do like to send him on a blitz. If he's picked up by a lineman or a bigger tight end on a blitz, if he can't get around them with the speed, he's going to just get overpowered massively.
To be fair, he
Yeah,
does
no, you could.
disguise them well.
He does disguise them well, but that's because they can't see him. It's a
I think,
compliment. It's a compliment, but
yeah, I think building on that, I think for me, when it comes to drafting him, I think that it's all the stuff you need to be aware of. That he does play really well on his tape, but he's just a very small human being. And I think looking into him as well, that there was a bit of injury history with him there. That there are a few injuries that could raise a few red flags in NFL front officers on top of his small size. I think for me, he's one of them players where I wouldn't be surprised if he's available in the fifth round. But I think if he's there in the fifth round, I think he's taken. I think progressing him on from. I think he's someone that'll start off the special teams. He might not be in your pass coverage day one, but I think he's someone like what the Saints had this year with Will Harris, where he played special teams for 3 years and then he's finally worked his way into the defense and then signed on with Washington this offseason. I think for me that's how he strikes, he comes across for me.
Well, I'm going to bring it back over to me and talk about my next favourite player. I've picked a player from the FCS level. I've gone for South Carolina State linebacker Aaron Smith. One-time first team All Conference, two-time second team All Conference. 2024, he finished up with 92 tackles, 8.5 TFLs, half a sack, a forced fumble, and an interception. When you watch this kid play, he's such an instinctive linebacker. He always appears to be the first defender to sniff out screens, passes, anything to the running back. You watch the entire of the defense will go one way, and he's flying the other way, straight to where the ball is. Always gets there right at the tackle point, whilst other players are still sort of reading their keys. His sort of processing appears to be really, really up there. And he's disciplined enough to not fall for too many sort of fakes, jukes, or anything by a ball carrier, which helps him be a really strong tackler as well. And not only is he sort of instinctive, I think those sort of instincts are quite twitchy, and I think he backs them up with a really impressive set of physical assets. Now, he is a speed guy, an absolute speed guy. So you talk about linebackers having true sideline to sideline speed. I think when it comes to linebackers with that sort of element, there's none better than him in this draft. His pro day results would have had him at least in the top 8 of every drill at the combine, with top 4 in over half of them. Once he's diagnosed to play, as we talked about, his speed lets him fly down, and he's nearly always the first or second man in on every tackle. And it's not just against the run that he uses it, it helps him get to a zone in passes quicker than QBs might anticipate, whether it's sort of in the hole in the middle or if it's out in the flats, he's quite quick to get there. He's not the best in man, but his speed does let him take a receiver in a way that not every traditional linebacker would be able to. And I think in sort of zone coverage, it lets him break on routes when he needs to as well. And of course, lets him be a challenging blitzer as well with how quick he can get there. And also, I think if you see him spy a QB, he really looks like a sort of QB's nightmare when he's sort of playing spy. Now, there are going to be concerns with him. I think First of all, his play style, sometimes he's too quick, he's too instinctive. He either over pursues or he gets there before the ball carrier is, opens up a cutback lane, or he'll jump a receiver who's just making a cut rather than turning to make the catch. Second is his size, 6'2", 220 pounds. It is a little bit undersized. Yes, it helps him be quicker, but it's not NFL level. His main move for getting off blocks is just to slip off the block, and it either works or it doesn't. And I think at the NFL level, it's not going to work as well. And then this last concern is going to be a concern that I think is going to repeat with a sort of two or three of our final guys, is they are playing at smaller schools. You play at a smaller school, your level of competition isn't as good, so it's harder to judge your talent. And unfortunately for Aaron Smith, he was injured during the Shrine Bowl, so he never got to perform in any of the drills where we could have seen him up against bigger names. So it is a harder sort of time to judge just how good he is. But for me, I really think he's sort of, as we calling them, diamond in the rough. If you're looking for a linebacker in this year's draft, I certainly think that you shouldn't look away from Aaron Smith. It's interesting what you think, Joe.
I agree with everything you've said, to be completely honest. I know I said I was going to pick him apart, but actually, no, I'm not. After kind of watching the limited tape I could find, which I think, again, is a slight issue with some of these final guys that we've got. It's a bit more difficult to actually watch some of their film. But he's a good player. He's a good player. He's speedy. I did pick up on the fact that he can over pursue, and I've seen it mentioned a couple of times when people have been speaking about him. You know, he can be too quick, um, which can be ironed out 100% at the NFL level. You know, you just need to be a bit more patient with things, let the game kind of open up a little bit more before you kind of open up with that full burst speed sometimes. Um, but man, I kind of see him. He's not your stereotypical kind of middle linebacker that you're really going to kind of have like that. I could see it in kind of like maybe um, a 4-3 defense. Kind of have him as one of those kind of outside backers. Ultimately, a little bit of a pro comp, but it's not. It's nowhere near the same. But because of kind of the player that he is, and because what I think he can do, um, similar to kind of how the Pats played him this past year, a little bit of a Mate Mapu. Um, I kind of see it like that. I also think if you're kind of going to rely on the speed more than the kind of linebacker ability, um, you're looking at a small school guy. There was a small school guy that the Pats picked up in round 2 that was very good for a few years. He's dealt with a couple of injury concerns, but Kyle Duggar, with kind of, you know, not the same player. They don't play the same position, but you know, it kind of goes to show that some of these small school guys, if you think they're good enough, they're going to go. NFL has gone away from kind of shying away from some of these small school guys because of his like, oh, what competition are they playing? Yes, I mean, I guarantee you, I wouldn't know really anyone that Smith's played against. But when it comes to the scouting, the tape doesn't lie. When he's got that speed, he's got that talent. Why not take a chance on him?
Yeah, and he stands out to me as just, you can't coach speed. You can't coach these players to be as quick as they are. Aaron Smith is just he relies on his speed, and it underpins pretty much everything he does on the football field. His instincts as well are just the cherry on top for me when it comes to his ability as a linebacker. I completely agree with everything you've said. That I have it as well. That he is over aggressive. He ends up in bad spots. He misses tackles just because he tries to get there a bit too early. He'll overrun something, and someone will just come up on his inside. But yeah, I think you can kind of look past his frame. You can kind of look past his size because of that speed, because of that ability to get there and make the tackle before anyone else does. But as I say, he's a strong tackler. He's decent in pass coverage. He's quick. He is a good day 3 kind of guy.
A couple months ago, he was getting fourth round talk about him, and I think not being able to compete at the Shrine Bowl sort of really hurt him. And it's sort of recency bias
Yeah.
and sort of player fatigue is a reason that he's no longer getting the same sort of talk and chat as he used to. You mentioned a couple of Patriots or expatriates there that you compared him to. I've actually got another, I think, expatriate, if I'm correct, that is my pro comp for him. My initial pro thought was Ivan Pace of the Vikings, but I thought their play styles just aren't the same. But
Yeah.
if you look into it a bit more, you look an undersized linebacker, plays the run well, he's okay in pass coverage, but you don't want to build his career around it. Borderline identical pro day numbers, and also happened to start his college career in the same HBCU conference as Smith did, Elandon Roberts.
Yeah.
Now, I think if you're looking for sort of landing spots for Smith here, his best fit is going to be going to a team that prioritizes using their D line to keep the linebackers clean. I think his ceiling is being a linebacker two pairing with a true Mike. Get him there, get him using that sideline to sideline speed, let him fly around, keep him clean from the D line, and let him sort of do all the fun tackling and the things we get creative with in the backfield.
So where you drafted him then, Kyle?
I'd draft him, yeah, early day 3, round 4.
So yeah, to bring it home, I'm gonna go for my third and final guy. I've gone for Andrew Armstrong, the wide receiver from Arkansas. 6'4", 202 pounds. He's a big dude at wide receiver, and he plays like it. He's got a big catch radius. He wins a lot of contested catches, a lot of in-breaking routes across the middle. He just is one of them players that he's a red zone threat. He's chuck it up to him in the red zone, and he comes down with the ball. He had 34 first down conversions in 2023. Obviously, that's not this year, just gone. And he did have a bit of a down year, which is why we're talking about him as a later round guy. He did have a down year for Arkansas. So I think he caught one touchdown the past year.
One touchdown pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One touchdown it's diminishing of returns for.
But he's a red zone threat, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's a red
Big
zone
red zone
threat.
threat. Single touchdown. I was going to be nice, and then
before-
you've gone and done that.
The year before, he did catch lots of touchdowns, but he did have a really down year this year. Obviously, bringing him into an NFL offense, he isn't going to be your number one guy. He doesn't have the deep speed. At 4.5, 140, he's not the quickest guy, but as a complement to speedier guys in the slot at wide receiver one, I think he is someone that can be utilised very well in an NFL offense. He's played against high-end competition, as we're saying. There's not against some of these guys that we're talking about. He's played against SEC competition. He's played against difficult teams, and he is a very tough run blocker. So to bring him in on running downs, he's someone that's going to win his blocks and let someone run off the back of him. But I know you've definitely got things to say about him, so I'll throw it over to you, Joe, first.
I don't actually have that many negatives to say about him. I think he can be a red zone threat. I think he can be a red zone threat. Is he one right now? No, he's not. I think one of the reasons why, to me at least, he's not a red zone threat, like you mentioned, is that he doesn't play with technique. He very much lacks the technique to be a red zone threat. Because to be a red zone threat, it's not just about being a big guy. Everyone has. God, you mentioned X receiver, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's the next Mike Evans." It's not. Mike Evans has so much technique behind him as well as being a big guy. And this guy really doesn't. He's never going to be a wide receiver one, and if he is, I'll eat this hat. But I think he's worth taking a chance on. If you've got maybe an aging kind of an X player, this is a draft class with not that many X kind of receivers, or true X receivers. I think he could be worth taking a chance on, kind of in the 5th round, maybe. But ultimately, I do think his technique just needs to improve massively.
So I'm not as negative on him. The only real negative I've got of him is the aforementioned lack of production. Yeah, I think what he's really good at is you've mentioned the catch radius, and he does catch a few errant passes that were either over or underthrown, but he's just really good at making the QB correct. If you look at how proficient he is with scramble drills, so many times the QB was either doing a boot or was being flushed out the pocket by the defense. He's rolling out, trying to find somebody, and it appeared that every time that pressure got through and protection broke down, the QB could just throw it up and Andrew Armstrong would be there. He's always sort of moving around, following the QB, getting into space and looking at his QB to let him know I'm here. But yeah, there's just the one huge concern is that touchdown production. 1 touchdown this season, 5 touchdowns the year before. That's 2 seasons of SEC football. He's put up nearly 2,000 yards. That's impressive. It's just the 6 touchdowns. There are some receivers score 6 touchdowns in 6 games, and he's barely done it across 2 seasons. Other than that, I think he's a fantastic player, and I think he could go in to be either a package player or if you've got a star receiver on one side, you could use him on the other boundary, perhaps. He needs to. I don't know whether it was the scheme or whether it's him. He needs to increase that red zone proficiency and get those touchdowns up.
I will say as well, I do like him as a player. Obviously, I was quite negative, kind of speaking about the lack of technique, because I think that if you're playing as an X, teams now know how to stop that kind of traditional X receiver that is just a big-bodied guy. I think you need some kind of technique, especially to open up the route tree as well, because you can't ultimately just run third, 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 third. You
But he
need
doesn't have
some
the
kind of
speed to
technique there. And ultimately, he's never going to be that kind of a guy that you're going to have him on the field all the time. And I do like him. I do like him. But Joe, where, let's say, for example, you are the New Orleans Saints. You don't draft a receiver in rounds 1, 2, or 3. Where are you taking a chance?
I think he's a player that the Saints could really use. I think he is that complement guy to Shaheed and Olave. But for me, I think he's in the similar range to what Bud Means was last year. I mean, I'm probably not as high as I'm not as high as Andrew Armstrong as I was. I was very high on Bud Means last year, and I still think Bud Means has bags of potential to really grow into the Saints offense. But I'd probably draft him late 5. I probably think he's a late 5 guy. I say if he's there early 6 for the Saints, I think we'll sprint the pick in. But I think he's a late round 5 guy. I think there are some other receivers this year that are probably going to go above him in that 5th round.
I'm going to bring us back down to earth for a minute. We're speaking about some of these later round guys, and we've only spoken about one from a small school. So we'll get into a couple of the smaller school guys right now. And this guy is someone, to be honest, when we were kind of looking into this episode, I didn't really know an awful lot about, purely because there's not an awful lot out there about him. It's very limited to be said about him. But I am a really big fan of Ice Waxter from Villanova. He stands at 6'1", 209 pounds, and he's an outside cornerback. He's got good size, 6'1", 209 pounds. He's a big kind of cornerback that can be very physical. Couple of notes on him: he's played 1,977 snaps in college. So he's a senior. He's had some experience there. The only issue is the experience comes from being at small schools. I will say he's very good at. Sounds really weird to say this. He's very good at not being a corner. He is very good at running downhill. He is very good at throwing his body into a tackle. He doesn't necessarily tackle with form, like you would imagine kind of like a DB to do, where they're just going to kind of like try and spear, kind of wrap the legs. He just kind of throws himself to it, which is really fun to see. He's a fun player to watch. And he has quite a nice peanut punch as well. Obviously, I know you two kind of struggle to find a little bit of tape on him, from the limited tape that is out there readily available. But there was a couple of points where, you know, he does as soon as if he does wrap around someone, he just punches and punches and punches to try and get that ball out. So they're the pros. There are a couple of cons with this one. Like I said, he does struggle to actually do a form tackle sometimes, and he just kind of throws himself into it. There's a couple of times where he throws himself into it, and you kind of think to yourself, "Listen, if this guy wasn't playing against Villanova, he would have just stepped to the side and avoided that tackle." Sometimes, I do think he's got quite short arms for his size, considering he's 6'1", he's got good weight to him. He's a little bit shorter in the arm length, and he's not fast for his size either. He's quite slow, especially kind of that open field speed. Finally, the final downside I will actually say about him, because I do really like him as a player, I'm just kind of trying to give a fairly level conversation, is he can be very grabby because he lacks some of that speed, because he can be very kind of like grabby with the receiver, which from what I saw, that's going to get flagged all the time in the NFL. But you know what? I'm not going to direct it to a single one of you. I'm just going to open it up to the floor. What are your opinions on Ice Waxter?
He's the real life embodiment of that Ralph Wiggum as the brick meme.
You're a
just,
madman. I love it.
just flying through the glass. That is completely
Apart
that
from
heavy tackles.
he isn't in danger, he is the danger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he is just very, very aggressive corner. That is running back's worst nightmare if he can get his hands on him. But yeah,
He can tackle. I was just giving some nuanced conversation, which, funnily enough, all the conversation around a player from Villanova is nuanced. But he can tackle. It's just on some of the clips that I've seen, he does kind of, especially when he's coming against down like a screen or something like that. He just, you wouldn't be shocked watching it if he just kind of front flipped at the guy.
He tackles like he's fallen off a surfboard. Like, just wipe out, like, just straight through.
The proper water boy tackling.
I still wouldn't want to be hit by him. I don't know about you.
No.
Leave him alone.
I've got the note of it. He's not quite as fluid as he probably should be as well. He does look a bit mechanical when he's going through the motions, and when he's changing direction, he's probably not the most fluid guy as well.
The previous cornerbacks we've talked about in this class had sort of something in common, or lack of. The size, they're quite small guys, and most of this class are relatively smaller corners. I think that is working in his favour, is his size. If a team needs a bigger corner to play outside the play boundary, to play press because of that size, they might take a flyer on him and look at him as a development project. He's someone who could see his draft pick, get pulled up a bit through pure need rather than anything else. It's interesting you said that he doesn't play like a corner. You look at how he tackles, you look at the fact that he's got that size that he could play man or press if needs to. I wondered, is there a possibility there of, do you reckon that he gets to a team and they say, well, let's take a look at you at strong safety? He's not played it as far as we can see, but the size, the tackling, the run support, and then if they play cover one, it still gives them an opportunity to use him in press if they need to. I think it's something that I'm not necessarily saying he's going to succeed in, but I think it's certainly something that teams would be interested in having a look to see if he can do it.
I would 100% agree with you, though.
Yeah,
I think
it
would be a fun experiment. I think ultimately, like Joe mentioned as well, though, because he's quite mechanical, I think when you've drafted him, you kind of need to say to him, like, you're going to be practicing at this position because, you've not played at kind of the higher level in terms of strong safety, or listen, you're going to be practicing at this position because we really need to refine those movements. Now, if it's me, this guy's a 7th round pick, possibly an undrafted free agent. This is kind of where the real conversation comes into play. as a player, you know, if let's say for example, um, he's probably going to be a situational package kind of guy. But if you're kind of in the red zone with an empty backfield, and there's just quite a few receivers out there, I can see him being the kind of guy that you want on the field to play press in the red zone, to be able to then come down at that breakdown speed and just cut down a screen of running back, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm kind of going with probably late seventh, mid seventh.
So from one small school guy to this year's king of small school guys, he is for me, I think, arguably the reason that we're even doing this episode. I decided back in October that this is who I was picking. We hadn't even decided we were doing a podcast at that point. But I just love this player so much. And I'm hoping at the end of this, all of you are going to love him as much as I do. I've picked the UC Davis running back, Land Larison, out of the Big Sky. 24 stats, 23 total touchdowns, nearly 1,500 yards on the ground, 850 yards receiving. Career 5,400 all-purpose yards and 51 touchdowns. He's a strong runner. He's difficult to bring down. He bounces off tackles. He bounces through tackles. He's got an array of stiff arms, hurdles, trucks, all sorts of these moves to punish these unsuspecting defenders who just say, that's a running back, we'll have him. He's not. You're laughing already. I'm so excited. I could do a full episode just on this man. He's got vision and patience that I think are both much more than you'd expect from an FCS running back. He's willing to wait for the right gap rather than force the first gap he sees. He makes his blockers work for him. Quite often you see him sort of looking, seeing where things are coming, and he can anticipate blocks that are coming sort of 2 or 3 levels down the field. But the thing that most people know him for is this versatile skill set. Not only is he willing to run, he's got a willingness to pass pro, even if it could be improved, and he's got positional versatility with reps at basically every offensive position throughout his career. He's played receiver, outside, slot, other side, all across the board. He's played tight end. He's obviously played fullback, running back. He's played quarterback. He has passing touchdowns. He's an ideal wildcat QB. Yet I get so excited. But the thing that he's most known for is his hands. He is, I think, universally agreed that he is the best receiving running back in this class, to the point that I think if you put him up purely against receivers, he'd still be a day 3 pick as a receiver alone, and that's not even his main skill set. He makes one-handed catches. He makes catches at full pace in open field. He makes catches in contested situations in traffic. There's one time there's 2 DBs hanging off him and he's still making catches. There's one the QB underthrows it. He's on running full pace against Southern Utah. Arm out behind him, one-handed, catches it and keeps going. Oh, and to boot, he's got over 1,000 kick return yards as well, so it's got special teams value.
Who's he played against?
Yeah,
Who's he played against?
Tomorrow.
Well, he's played against Cal, he's played against Oregon State, he's played against the shadows of the Pac-12, which, to be honest, is more than what some teams do. I will not take any Land Larison slander. Land Larison is my kid.
No. And the thing is, I would love to absolutely just shoot you down there in all your happiness because you're so excited about him. But he is such a fun player to watch. There are a couple of things that I've seen on kind of I've not watched a ton of tape on him, I'll be completely honest. But on the tape that I've seen, a couple of things that I kind of noticed. Like you said, he's got really good vision. He sees down the field really well. I think sometimes he can slow himself down on his cuts. I think sometimes in his cuts, he kind of not even slows himself down, weighs himself down, kind of puts too much of his kind of weight low. And I think sometimes that can be a bit of a hindrance to him. It's difficult to talk about the speed sometimes because even though he is a really speedy guy on film, on the clips that I've seen, sometimes he's still getting caught up by some of these players that they aren't big school guys necessarily.
He doesn't have elite NFL long speed, but he doesn't build his game around it. So
no, he doesn't.
I do get you what you mean though. He isn't a speedster per se.
And I'm nitpicking right now because he is such a fun player to watch. I said to you before, this is your slot receiver, and you really shouted at me, and I wasn't a fan of that. So I'm going to keep out of that. You've covered a lot on him, to be honest. You kind of just went on this really big rant, and you've covered some talking points that I had. So all I'm going to say is he's a good player. Will it translate? Because we've not really in such a stacked running back class where some of these guys have really gone up against kind of like top tier talent. I think that's one of those things where you're definitely going to take a chance on him. But Joe, I'll throw it over to you. Kind of, do you have anything to bring Carl down a peg?
What I'm going to open with definitely doesn't bring him down a peg. And what I want to say is that I really enjoyed watching him as a Taysom Hill fan. Like, yeah, he does. He's a strong runner, great stiff arm. He plays a lot stronger than he looks.
Do you not think he plays quite high though?
He does play high. He does play high, but I think he's got the strength against his level of competition to kind of counteract that. It doesn't
against his level of competition.
Yeah, exactly.
That really says a lot about him going into the NFL, doesn't it?
I feel like that is.
He's got it to play against his level of competition, but when you're not
the underlying thing is the level of competition. I know we've said he's played against some big schools, but most of his tape, and most of his games have been against small schools. That the NFL is going to be a massive step up for him. It's a step up for any rookie, but it's going to be a big step up for him in general. And if he can emulate even like half of what Taysom Hill's done, he'll have a successful NFL career. But I think the speed for me is the thing I've noted that I've got that he recorded a 4.4640, which isn't the worst 40 in the world. I mean, there are a lot.
That's good for a running back. Though.
Yeah,
that's good for a running back.
Tyler Brooks would take that as 40 speed, but it's not the top end in the class. But that it's not to take away from the fact that as a late round guy, he definitely is going to be worth taking a flyer on from whoever ends up taking that flyer on him.
I would ask Kyle where he wants to take him. Yeah, I would ask Kyle where he wants to take him, but I can guarantee you.
We'll get that. You'll hate it, and I don't care. There's an obvious lazy comparison if you're looking for a pro comp. I'm not going to make. I'm not going to say, "Oh, he's the next Christian McCaffrey."
I will. He's the small school Christian McCaffrey.
I mean, that also works. Jahmyr Gibbs, that sort of style. But with those two players in mind, I saw a stat on Twitter. This is a list of every running back prospect since 2014 that has averaged 40 yards receiving per game and 2 yards per route run in the same season. Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne, Rashad White, Kenneth Gainwell, Ashton Genty, and Lan Larison. Even if he ends up on a par with the worst person in that group, respectfully to him, even if he ends up on a par with Kenneth Gainwell in that's a good career for a guy out the FCS. Kenneth Gainwell's got 400 yards a season in the NFL so far every year. That's a good level, and I think he's going to be better. He's a well-rounded player who shows exciting flashes and a track record of finding the end zone. Despite the flaws, I think he's really got the ceiling of an above-average caliber running back with dynamic pass game use. Even for me, his floor is a top-tier RB3 with elite special teams value. I think every special teams coordinator in the league has him as like their top 3 player for pure special teams value. Consensus on him is late day 3 to priority UDFA. Now, this might come as a shock. I disagree with the consensus. I have him inside my top 100 players, and he's not really close to the bottom. He's my running back 5, and I would take him in the second round with no doubt whatsoever.
Sorry, can you just list off your top 5 running backs? I want to see who you've kept out.
Top 5 running backs. Genty, obviously, Hampton, Sampson, and Johnson, the Iowa kid. I've got them both.
So you don't have either of the Ohio State guys in your top 5?
No Scatterboo.
Nope, he's 6.
You're mental.
You can call me mental. In 5 years' time, you will all come crawling back to me going, how did we get it so wrong?
Maybe I will.
Have you seen
Probably,
the moustache? The moustache is worth the first round pick alone.
To be fair, the look of the guy, he just looks like a good player. He's got that. You know what he's got? He's got the rugby player look. Like if you saw him in this country, you'd think that guy's plays rugby and he's good at it.
He's one of the lads. He's lad
He
Larrison.
is.
That's a tongue twister.
That's Larrison. On that note, let's wrap things up, shall we?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up because otherwise I'm going to keep talking for another 10 minutes about the future NFL Hall of Famer that is Lan Larrison. Next week we've got our collab mock draft coming up, where we'll be doing a first round mock between the three of us, working together, doing a what we would do. So not necessarily what's going to happen, but based on our rankings of players, where we think they're going to fit, where we think they might go, and we may even throw a couple trades as well.
So yeah, no matter where you're listening, please sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Please follow us on Spotify. And until next time, it's goodbye from me. And it's goodbye from everyone else.
Bye.
Second round pick, baby. I've just got, in my head, I'm just imagining Lockwood sat outside the Saints sort of facilities going boom, 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 until they bother to do something with him.